Nahida! She's finally back after having had a rerun banner for quite some time, and a lot of patches have passed, so does a lot of content have come, which is why we have a pretty important video today focusing on an updated build for our lovely Nahida, so that for those of you who have just pulled for her or is planning to look into any kind of update towards Nahida, this is a perfect time for you to do so. We'll basically go through her most important part of her skills and kits, look into how good she's doing in the current meta, as well as updated build regarding artifacts, weapons, and best teams. But before we jump into the video guys, I just want to thank today's video sponsor, Tokyo Treats and Sakuraco. So Tokyo Treats and Sakuraco are Japanese subscription box services that offer snacks all the way from Japan right to your doorstep. So all their boxes contains a cultural guides booklet that tells you everything you need to know about what's inside the box, as well as the information about the snack's history, origins, ingredients, and other fun facts. So for Tokyo Treats, who's a monthly pop Japanese snack subscription box, you will get up to 20 of the latest exclusive limited edition and seasonal flavored Japanese snacks that are only available in Japan for a limited time. If you're looking for a mildly sweet cracker like snacks, then look no further. I always look forward to press in Tokyo Treats boxes, as we basically have unique flavor every time. Or if you're looking for something that's both sweet and soury, then Tokyo Treats have you covered as well with the mishmash soda candy. Pretty chewy guys, savory snacks are some of my favorites. Ever wondered what Americanized fried potato snacks from Japan actually taste like? Well, let me tell you that they do have quite a unique flavor, alright? Definitely some of the first thing you should try once you get the box. And if you're a fan of red beans, then these pillowy soft red bean donuts will surely make you happy, just like me, who have to open up and test it out right away the moment I saw this. Now Sakuraco is a monthly authentic Japanese snack subscription box. Sakuraco is supporting local Japanese snack maker. Each box comes with at least 20 traditional, authentic, and artisan Japanese snacks, including Japanese teas and special Japanese tableware. Now usually I don't eat too much mochi because they tend to be a little bit too sweet, but I just have to give a thumbs up to these lemon mochi because this is actually the very first mochi that's not too sweet for me, and the slightly soury flavor of lemon is really good for me. Taiyaki is a traditional Japanese fish-shaped treat that has been cherished for generations, and if you're a fan of sweet beans, you would definitely enjoy these snacks. Now, there are so many cute designs in Sakuraco box, but one of my most favorite is definitely this fortune lucky cat on the cover. It's a very small snack, yet they took great care into designing it, and inside is a very delicious flavory rice cake. Peanuts are usually one of my most favorite snacks, especially when they're slightly coated with sweetness. But unlike many sugar-covered peanuts out there, these peanuts are actually covered in a pleasantly sweet white miso, which is pretty unique to me. Now we come to the best parts of every Sakuraco box. Usually they come with a piece of diningware. But this month we also get something very special, and it's called a Neko Furoshiki. Well, Neko is obviously stands for cat. As you can see, it has cat design all over the cloth, but this in Japan usually is called a wrapping cloth, where you can use it to wrap your lunchbox to bring to school or your workplace. I really love and appreciate Sakuraco for sharing this with us from such a fan of Japanese design like these items. Plus the cloth has lucky cat design, which is really adorable. Thank you so much Tokyo Treat and Sakuraco for sponsoring this video. Now they gave me a coupon code to share with you all, so you can experience these snacks for yourself. For more information guys, check my description box as my pinned comment to get access to the link with the coupon code. Now, Nahida has always been one of my most favorite character ever since her announcement, not just regarding character release, but the character within the stories as well. Nahida is such a lovable character, and she's definitely a popular character to us as well, especially when she is the Dendro Archon. And yes, when it comes to gameplay, her power level is definitely right there at the top. But it has been a while since she was released, therefore ever since Fontaine arrived, it also brought in some new content for Nahida, especially regarding team builds, which is definitely something we'll be looking in depth in today's video. Now, before that, I want to have a quick look into Nahida's skills and kit once again. I won't be going through in depth because assuming you've already know the basics of Nahida's skills and kit, but I'll just be covering some of the most important points, so that is kind of like a refresher for you. Nahida's normal attack talent. Now, this is not like a dead skill on many of the supporter catalysts out there, but while if you're having Nahida as a sub DPS character off field, most of us won't be focusing on normal attack, but if you are having her as an on field, this can be worth it to level up once you have focused on your E skills and elemental burst. Because yes, many of us do have Nahida as the driver on field for us, but the more important and most important part of her kit would definitely goes toward her E skill, because regardless of whether or not you have her on or off field, elemental skill for Nahida is the highest damaging part that she has in her arsenal, and it is indeed one of the most powerful skill across most of the Dendro characters as well, where she's able to mark multiple enemies on field with a Seed of Skandha, and therefore that's where her sub DPS powers comes in. For when your party members triggers the elemental reactions on the opponents that is affected by her Seed of Skandha, Nahida's E skill will trigger and do damage to all of the opponent that is marked by her seeds. And this is not just being done on individual enemies, but her E skill has the ability to link all enemies that is within a certain AoE together, and when one of the enemies take the damage from her Seed of Skandha, every enemies that is marked will also be taking their damage as well, which is why Nahida is such an amazing Dendro character at dealing off-field damage together with Dendro applications. Now, I'm sure most of you have already known, but her skills has two options of you either doing press or hold. Press is you just doing her E skill quickly to apply her Seed of Skandha, ideally just to one enemies or very close range enemies grouped together. Most of the time we won't be using this, but we're just going to be using her hold options, where she kind of draws up kind of like a camera lens and mark the Seed of Skandha on a group of enemies going up to pretty far range. Another reason why her E skills is so good is that it stays on your enemies basically around 25 seconds, while her E skills have basically a 5-second cooldown. So as long as you have Nahida on your team, basically you always have your enemies marked with a Dendro element all the time, and on top of that, her E skills deals very good numbers, which makes her to be some of the best sub DPS character out there in the game. Also, a very important part of Nahida's kit is her elemental burst, where it is pretty unique, where Nahida basically covers a huge area with an illusory domain. It is actually pretty huge, guys, and technically it covers most of the abyss chambers in its size. Now on paper, the buff appears to be pretty nice. However, depending on the situation, it might not be as valuable as they appear. But first of all, the Hydro buff, for example, have her burst duration increased. Now, it's not always a needed thing for her burst to be increased, because generally, Nahida burst only costs 50 energy, therefore, Nahida can basically already have her burst on 100% of the time. The Pyro buff can be nice at times, however, in reality, Nahida team doesn't always have a Pyro character, because yes, she focuses more in terms of aggravates and hyper bloom or even bloom teams. Therefore, most of the time you'll be able to make use the most out of her electro buff from her burst. With a decrease in interval between HE skill triggers can be quite nice. So it's definitely going to be situational and not something you always have to keep in mind to remember and try to force yourself to build a team just for the buff of her burst. Her A1 does is that whenever her burst is active, she does provide a pretty sizable EM buff to the on-field character. Now do keep in mind that this will be taken into account of the party member that has the highest EM, so it doesn't always necessarily have to be Nahida. However, from the way Nahida will be built, most of the time, it will be taking effect from Nahida's EM. Her A4 passive is really powerful, for she basically gets a maximum of 80% bonus damage and 24% crit rate for her E skill, the more EM that is built onto her. So technically speaking, this caps out at 1000 EM for Nahida, can easily be achieved with fully EM builds and specific weapons with high EM secondary stats, making her a very much more potent character as a sub DPS member on your team. Now that's basically the nitty-gritty of Nahida's skills and kits. As I've mentioned before, Nahida does have 2 playstyle, and of course it's going to be on-field or off-field. It's not really too tricky in terms of each of her playstyle. Definitely off-field is going to be the easiest. You're just going to be there casting her E skill and her burst, and then the rest is done by your other party members. Therefore, when it comes to talent priority of her off-field, her skill is going to be the most important, and then comes to her burst. You don't really have to go for normal attack if you don't want to. But then if you are going to be having Nahida on field, then you're going to technically want to increase your normal attack talent level as well. And so with a refresh idea of what Nahida is capable to do, the important question is going to be how Nahida is doing in the current meta at this point in time, basically discussing around, patch 4.4. So yes, ever since Nahida was released, she's definitely one of the best character in the game, not just for being, an Archon, but her kit is just so valuable already. Because first of all, as we have known, sub DPS character is generally gonna have a much longer lifespan than, hyper carries. Therefore, as long as we have Nahidas on our account, she's always gonna be a very valuable character for an absolutely long time, because her competition out there is going to be much less. And of course, that's definitely the case for Nahida in the current meta. And yet, basically speaking, some of her most popular teams are just going to be much more better over time, as Dendro reactions is still some of the best reactions we're using to date. Very easy to play with some of the more better character roster out there. Nahida can work really well with a new Villette, basically one of the best hyper carries we have in the game right now. On top of that, she works together with Furina on team 2. So some of the newer and best Fontaine character have just arrived. Nahida can already work absolutely fantastic together on their team. And on top of all of the older content that Nahida is capable of, yes, you will definitely never regret pulling for a Nahida. And more importantly, guys, Nahida is such a complete character at C0. She does not need any of the constellations, unlike some of the top tier character that is running alongside with her. Because take character like New Villette or Furina, I've just mentioned to you earlier, they are very good new Fontaine character that's being ranked as some of the best character. However, their best potential sometimes are locked behind a C1 or a C2. Like New Villette C1 is just so valuable on him, or Furina C2 is such a different character from her C0 that technically speaking you want to invest into those constellations. However, Nahida on the other hand, she does not need Constellation to fully operate. Constellation on Nahida is just going to be there helping you doing higher number on her. So that's basically the reward that you get from Nahida investment, which is why Nahida for free-to-play player is really good, and she will continue to be some of the best character in future to come. And so with that in mind, guys, let's dive into some of the best builds Nahida has currently. First off, we look into her best artifacts. Well, at this point in time, we've already had so many artifacts released ever since she arrived, but Nahida still only has the 2 same best artifacts ever since, which is gonna be Deep Wood and Gilded Dreams. Now Deepwood is more going to be favorable on her, so generally I would recommend you to try and get Deepwood memories on Nahida. However, the good thing about farming the artifacts domain is that you also get the Gilded Dream, which is also another best artifact set onto Nahida. So generally speaking, even though Deepwood is going to be favored, if you do get better starts on Gilded Dream like I am, using Gilded Dreams over Deepwood is wholly fine. Not to mention when Deepwood memory is only needed on one character on the team. So for example, if you're using Nahida on a double Dendro team, the other character on your team can actually run Deepwood, and Nahida on Gilded Dreams is going to be a perfect combination. Now, generally in terms of artifact stats, the most simple way to build Nahida is just going to be going full EM on 3 of her sands, goblets and circlets, and that's definitely something you want to do when you're building her as a off-field character, which I'm sure most of us are going to be doing. However, if Nahida is an on-field character, her EM requirement is actually going to be a bit less because she does get that A1 passive buff of enhancing her EM, and yes, that also applies to your Nahida. So generally speaking, you will only need around 750 50 EM if your Nahida is an on-field character. So then if your EM requirement has already met, then you can actually swap out for a Dendro Goblet for a bit more of damage capability for your Nahida. As for energy requirement guys, you absolutely don't need to fret about it too much. If you're able to get energy recharge on Nahida's substats of her artifacts, that's totally perfect already. 50 energy is easy to make up for, and generally speaking you will be able to have her burst up 100% of the time. Now onto some of Nahida's best weapons. Well, Thousands of Floating Dreams is definitely gonna be her BIS options, no doubt about that. On number 2, however, not that far behind actually, is Kagura's Verity. If you're using this as an on-field Nahida, then it's almost going to be as good as the Thousands of Floating Dreams, because Nahida is actually able to make very good use of Kagura's passive skills. However, if you're on off-field, then this will be a little bit less in values, but it's very hard for Nahida to make full use of this weapon. Now if you don't have the 5-star options, we move on to the 4-star, and the Sacrificial Fragment is technically going to be the best 4-star at this point in time. The extra skill cast that it gives to Nahida isn't really too valuable, but it has some of the best EM stats on a weapon out there for a 4-star, so Sac Fragment is a very good option. But other than that guys, if you're looking for an EM weapons and you don't really have any good 4-star options for EM, then the Magic Guide is actually going to be her best free-to-play option out there for EM, because this weapon has very good EM numbers, and Nahida is also able to make use of this passive pretty well. Therefore a perfect option for Nahida if you're lacking in weapon of her choice. In terms of fully support, if you want, then Thrilling Tales of Dragon is kind of fine on her, though I don't really recommend you guys to do that. But if say you're, in the middle of the game and you're lacking in weapons, but you do have Thrilling Tales, and yeah, you can use that on Nahida for the time being and be a pretty good supporter for your other hyper carries. Now since Nahida has been out for a while, I do know that many of us have already have her at least at the C0, and you guys might be wondering how good is her constellation, which is why we're going to be looking into how good her constellation really is at this point in time. Nahida C1 actually has pretty low impact since it buffs some of the most inconsistent parts of Nahida's kit, as we have mentioned before regarding her burst. And so for example, you have to choose between her weapon or a C1 Nahida, definitely guys just go for her weapon, it is infinitely going to be better. But if you are able to get to Nahida C2, oh my god, yes, C2 Nahida is one of the best constellation we have in the game right now. So much leverage given to Nahida, even though as I have mentioned, it does not change Nahida gameplay in any way, because all of Nahida constellation will focus on improving her damage, but Nahida C2 just increase her damage level to such high that if I were to recommend you to invest into any constellations in the games, I would just tell you to save up for Nahida C2, and you would technically annihilate everything whenever they're up against Nahida. It is just that good. C3 basically buffed her E skill, so yes, more damage to her E. C4 is a constellation that increase EM for Nahida, so now yes, you'll be able to invest into more of crit rate and crit damage toward her artifacts build, and you don't really have to use too much of an EM piece anymore. C5 increase her burst talent, which is fine, though I don't really recommend you to get a C5 only, since C6 is right after, as it can significantly increase the damage that Nahida is able to output. Basically increase her damage from C5 to C6 is roughly 40%, which is a really huge gap. But yes, since it is a C6, it is at least something we can consider. So as we have discussed guys, you can see that Nahida constellation is very valuable. If you're into the meta guys and you really love Nahida, you want to invest into her, definitely C2 is a perfect thing for you to have. If you have the Primo Gems, you don't know where else to invest into, you've got some of the better hyper carries out there for you, just invest into a C2 Nahidas guys, because yes, that's how good her C2 actually is. And so with knowing all of this in mind, we move on to the most fun parts of the build, and it's going to be team building. Now since Nahida is a sub DPS character, she can technically works in most team. Sad that Nahida don't really work too well in Geo, Cryo, as well as some of the Anemo team, because Dendro doesn't react with those elements, but other than that, she can slot in basically the rest. Though I will be discussing some of the most updated and best Nahida team teams right here. However though guys, one thing to note, if you are kind of like a mid and earlier game player, where generally speaking you don't really have too many characters on your account, is that guys, as you have known, Nahida really relies on elemental reactions. Therefore Nahida by herself doesn't do much, and she relies heavily on other party members on your account. And so in short, there are two very important characters for Nahida's team if you're technically lacking most of the character we have right now, and those two are going to be Kuki Shinobu and Xingqiu. For yes, Nahida thrives really well in Hyper Bloom teams, and Xingqiu and Kuki Shinobu is a perfect character for you to have on that team, and Kuki Shinobu of course is a perfect character for Nahida in an Aggravate team. Definitely the more Electro and the more Hydro options you have out there, the easier for you to build a Nahida team. But those are kind of like the two very basic characters. If you are lacking in those two, it is generally very hard to build a team around Nahida, so just keep that in mind. So discussing about Dendro reaction, we of course have Aggravates in terms of Nahida teams. Well, don't really have to discuss too much in terms of Aggravates as well as Spread team whenever it comes to Nahidas guys, because yes, that's already some of the best team that we have. Now regarding some of the best options when it comes to Aggravates Nahida, you can run on teams like Nahida, Alhaitham, Yaimiko and Kuki Shinobu. They work absolutely perfect well with each other, but that's definitely going to be a more invested team. So if you're looking for a more free-to-play options, that's going to be Nahida, Yao Yao, or Kuki Shinobu, Yaimiko and then Fischl. Hyper Bloom is going to be up next, well as you have guessed it. Now we have already discussed two of the newest Fontaine character out there, which is going to be Furina and Neuvillette. Absolutely a perfect character if you want a slot in on Nahida's team. So if you want to have kind of like, you know, a Neuvillette Hyper Bloom team, then you can run Neuvillette, Nahida, Furina and Kuki Shinobu. A bit of a tricky teams for you to trigger Dendro cores, because Neuvillette is going to have to be pretty close to the enemies whenever they drops the Dendro cores for Kuki to trigger Hyper Bloom. But if you're all in on a self-sustaining Neuvillette, then we have seen teams like Neuvillette, Nahida, Furina and Raiden Shogun, a very impressive team indeed, and you will have to invest into it a lot. But since Raiden Shogun is also such a good character in terms of triggering Hyper Bloom, she's a perfect fit on this team. Now other Hyper Bloom options, definitely you can run with Nahida, Furina, Alhaitham and Kuki Shinobu, also a perfect options for you to have, or Nahida, Kuki, Xingqiu and Yelan if you're looking into more of a Nahida Onfield, as well as a little bit more, you know, free to play kind of gameplay. Now when we're talking about Dendro reactions, definitely we cannot miss out on blooms, and there are no better character in terms of bloom than Nilou Bloom. Generally if you're into bloom teams, Nilou is going to be a character on your account. Then Nahida, Nilou, Furina and Yao Yao is technically one of the best Nilou Bloom team out there right now. I've been using and having fun so much with this team in the current Abyss, and it does absolutely insane damage. So yes, you guys can test this team out. Now if you're into Bergen team, then you can run with Nahida, Thoma, Yelan and Yao Yao for example, because Thoma is generally a character that is kind of like a must-have on Bergen team. He's such a good Bergen triggerer that if you're into Bergen, Thoma has to be built. So yeah, Bergen team is going to be a little bit more restrictive, so it has been a little bit less popular than other options. But while yeah, if you're into different Nahida team builds, then playing Bergen is definitely going to be fun team too. Now I know that Nahida has a lot of other teams option, so if you are using Nahida in some of the other teams as well, feel free to let me know, as I always love to discuss more teams options for Genshin characters. So that should be everything I have to say regarding Nahida's updated build in the current meta. I hope that it was a very informative video for you and have given you some ideas in terms of Nahida build. If you have any questions guys, leave it down in the comment section and I or some other lovely Genshin player will get to you there. If you're new to the channel guys, don't forget to subscribe, as I post a lot of Genshin guides and builds to help you guys out, as well as fun Genshin videos out there. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me to this part of the video guys, and with that I wish you a super day and I will catch you on my next video.